Greetings YouTube, this is Gun Fun, wanting to show you guys another reloading mod that is very useful and very simple and economical. If you have a LEE Auto Breech Lock Pro, or ABLP, you can set it up for less than about $6 to have a built-in swaging function. It can't be happening at the same time as your regular reloading, but it does make it very useful for bulk brass processing, especially conversion of cartridges like 223 or 308 NATO that come in military primer crimp configurations to something useful, having a clean primer pocket. So you can bulk deprime your dirty brass, swage it at the same time, and have it ready for processing. Well, I'm going to switch from a do and show you it in operation so you can decide whether it's something you want, and then I'll give a brief overview of how I did it. I have made Okay, I think this is probably about as good an angle as I'm going to get to show the press and everything in action. I'm not going to be working at full speed. This is definitely a thing where you need to find the rhythm of the press because primarily 223 is tippy and wants to fall over if you have the wrong rhythm. Every press has its rhythm. This is a more picky of the things for this particular press. It's a lot less picky with shorter cases like 300 blackout or wider cases, obviously. Anyway, I'll quit yammering and go. So this is definitely a thing where you want to set yourself up so you can use your force. I have my shoulder level with this and I can give it a good shove. And that's going to be important. So the first thing you'll notice is when I pull this up, there will be a little bit of a pop because the swager is stuck in the primer. Pop. I just deprimed a case, pop that off the swager. I find my rhythm, let that shell stabilize, push it forward, give it a good shove. Now that's seated the swager into the primer pocket. A little bit too fast, that case wanted to fall over. And there you just witnessed one of the least favorite things about the ABLP. The shell plate doesn't hold enough of the rim for 223, which makes it very easy to feed 223, but it also occasionally mangles them. So I get to widlerize this one, so that doesn't contaminate my future work. That does happen occasionally. I think the speed is worth that, although I would be very interested in getting a tighter fitting shell plate. Alright, so that's enough to give you an idea of how fast it can go. I did about 6 gallons, give or take, of 223 brass that was all mixed range dirty brass in about maybe an hour and a half, I would guess. It's pretty quick. Maybe it was 2 hours. I didn't really time it. Then I ran it all through the wet tumbler, and one of the annoying things about 223 is it's small, so it fills up with water, and the pins don't want to fall out of it. Getting the primer out of there not only cleans your primer pocket, but it also breaks that water suction so the junk will dump out of it. So in my opinion, this is something I want to do every time before I actually tumble my 223 brass, or 556. Same. And it is not the most dramatic looking swage. It is actually minimalist. I used to use a reamer, and sometimes I would go overkill. And so this is enough. Hopefully I can get a focus that you can see. Like, you can still see that it was crimped, but it will seat a primer pocket. That's obviously adjustable depending on the angle and shape of your swager that you make and how much force you use to seat it. One of the limitations of this press is the tool head is essentially held on by collet, and if you do not really crank that down when you're putting the pressure on, you will scooch the entire tool head assembly up on the ram. So you're going to have to disassemble the press to install this, and when you reassemble it, you're going to want to use a cheater bar and get that good and stinking tight. Okay, let's look at what I did. So I'm going to drop you down. Sorry for the jostling. I'd rather not have to cut this again. So I've made this swager. You can see it's tapered. I have a little bit of lube on here. In this case, I'm using STP oil treatment. It is a pretty good lube. This is made from a grade 8 quarter 20 fine thread bolt that was 3.5 or 4 inches long. You can see I've started to cut the head off of this one because I was going to make another one to send to Kenny. I have just quick and dirty ground some square wrench flats there, and then on the threaded section I ran it into a thread die and cut a slot in there so that I could put a slot screwdriver in the end of the threaded section, and that's really the more useful one. And then when I ran the die off, it made sure that I didn't have any burrs in the threads. You could do the same thing with a nut if you don't have a die. You will need in tools this, which is like, I think they were about 70 cents each, maybe it was 65. I'd get a couple extras in case you goof one up and make one for your friend while you're at it. You will need the appropriate drill and tap for the fine thread quarter inch. What is it? Quarter 28, I think. At any rate, I had that. You have to take off the press posts and all of these and get all that stuff out of the way. And underneath this little guy, if you just pull this out, you'll see that there is a hole for centering this pin. It is fortunately centered under the primer. It would have been a big pain if it wasn't, but it is. So you can use their existing hole. Be very sure to drill it exactly vertically, and this isn't really an easy thing to get onto a drill press or a mill, short of more trouble. So I freehanded it, but I freehanded it carefully. Anyway, how did I make this? Well, here's my first draft of the pin. And I made it a little shorter than I liked. This one works. I'll send it to somebody who wants it. It's pretty simple. I chucked the bolt in a drill and held it against a grinder or a belt sander until I got about the taper I wanted. When it was a little bit big, I put the calipers on it, and using a pen, a Sharpie to dicum it up, I found the point on the taper, so I'm just grinding it, holding it at an angle here. I'll pretend that this is the grinder. I've got it in the drill. I'm holding it this angle against a grinder wheel until I get the angle I want, or a belt sander, and it'll be pointy. You put your calipers on a primer and choose a point that's just a little bit bigger than that and a little bit smaller than that. Cut it off just smaller than the primer, and then you grind it your way back and do some test fits until it's swaging in enough that the primers seat nicely. That's really how you find your diameter. Now, I chose to have a continuous taper here. The one I have on the press is maybe just a little bit more shallow angle on the grind. I was experimenting with how much I want that to be. The shallower angle goes in with less force, but it will bottom out in the primer pocket with less flaring done. I wanted to be sure of getting enough flaring. I also slightly radius this. When I found the right dimension I wanted, I ran it in the drill on some oiled sandpaper up through about, I think I stopped at 1,000 grit. It's pretty nice polish. This one I maybe actually did a better job than my final version. But then the actual working area, I spent a little bit more time on the surface finish. That will make a big difference for you, and you will want to periodically touch it up with lube. You want to run the press down so you have enough force that you feel it sticks and comes off with a pop. If you didn't feel that pop, then you probably did not put enough muscle into your swaging operation. And if you cut corners on that, you can definitely give yourself a case that will cause you a problem later. So I always put in the full effort.